Welcome to the opening press conference of the 7th Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction for the Americas and the Caribbean, RP21. Welcome to the more than 2,000 delegates who I'm told are joining from all over the Americas and the Caribbean. Very special welcome to the media colleagues who join from about 18 or so jurisdictions. And this RP21, as you know, is taking place in a virtual forum for the very first time. And for the very first time, it is being hosted by a Caribbean nation, being one of the world's most vulnerable regions to extreme weather events and seismic activity. I'm so pleased to welcome all of you to Capital City, Kingston. As I look on the outside, I see the harbor. And whenever I drive down here in the mornings, I worry that a couple of years from now, the sea is going to be closer. So it is my hope, with all that is going on here and all that is going on in Glasgow, in Scotland, that we can do what we must so the sea level rise will be less than I fear. For this press conference this afternoon, I'm your moderator. My name is Emily Shields. You can clap, those of you in the room. Good to see you. Thank you. Big up Jamaica, big up to the Caribbean. I'll just tell you briefly, we're going to have two speakers, our local government minister, Honorable Desmond McKenzie, and we'll also have a presentation from Ms. Mami Mizuturi, who is a special representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction from UNDRR. And immediately after their very brief presentations, we're going to have questions from colleague journalists from all over the 18 or so jurisdiction who join us. And I shall tell you about the media training which we must take part in, which is coming up later on this week. So our first speaker for this press conference is our local government and rural development minister. Mr. Desmond McKenzie has been in politics for a very long time. He started his political career in local government fraternity under the Jamaica Labour Party government. He was a councillor for Denham Town long before I was born, but it doesn't show. And he did that. After many years later, he became the Member of Parliament for Kingston Western Political Division. And he sits here today with a lot on his shoulder, but knowing exactly how to maneuver it in this very difficult time. Here's Minister for his 5 to 7 minute presentation, Local Government and Rural Development Minister, Honorable Desmond McKenzie.
Thank you, Emily. First of all, let me welcome Mami again. Good to see you in the afternoon. And let me extend a special acknowledgement to the media fraternity that is participating in today's first press briefing. I'm extremely happy because today I consider to be a very successful first day of the conference. The success is measured in many ways. And I want to, first of all, use the opportunity to express my gratitude first to our mayors who turned out and supported the opening ceremony and stayed and participated in the entire day session. Thank you so much, mayors. To the CEOs of the municipal corporations and to the disaster coordinators, whose effort I think is commendable, because as Emily rightly says, as a country, we are in a region that is prone to disaster. So it means that the local authorities is that first line of defense. it is through our municipal corporations that we activate the various programs, whether we are using the programs to mitigate or whether we are using the program in a recovery mode. We are dependent on our local authorities, and I must commend them. I want to also say that when we look at the number of persons who have registered to participate in the conference, Jamaica is well represented. The outcome over the next 4 days, I am positive of the outcome. I think one of the highlights so far has been the Youth Forum, which was held in the same auditorium last Tuesday, I think, or Wednesday. And I was extremely proud of the deliberations that came out of the Youth Forum. And again, I want to make the point that represented in that forum that took place were a number of young people who came out of the local government system, who in some shape or form have either been the junior mayor or hold some position in what we call the junior council, which is a means of molding and exposing young people to what disaster is all about. So we are extremely satisfied on day one. I'm hoping that over the next 3 days, we will look at various issues. And the issue that concerns me most of all is the question of COVID-19 and the effects that it have had on small island states such as Jamaica and other in the region. It speaks therefore to the realignment and the recognition of the critical must see, must accept, must reach out approach that is needed by the Americas to ensure that small island states are not just seen as numbers at conferences. It should not be if we feel like engagement. I believe the time is ripe, the time is now for this kind of engagement, because what it has done, it has exposed the region, not because of ineffective and inefficient governance. It is a situation that has affected the world. And we here in Jamaica and other such countries have suffered not from the physical attack of COVID, but the lack of access to vaccination, which for me says a lot at a time of a crisis that is affecting the world. There's one constituency, ladies and gentlemen, that have suffered severely, and that is our children. Face-to-face classes in Jamaica has been severely disrupted. And what this pandemic has exposed is a weakness in our countries such as Jamaica, and the other countries in the Caribbean and in the region are able to respond. So I'm hoping that the discussions around COVID will not just be seen in the context of what COVID has done, but what it is that we can do to ensure that we are in a much better position to be able to respond, and respond in a way that allow the region to feel as if we are a part of that wider constituents of the Americas and the Caribbean. So those are my opening comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Desmond McKenzie. You know, Minister, as you spoke, I went back to the concept note which was prepared by this team for this RP21. And I want to read this to you because even though we see it here, I think sometimes we don't really appreciate the wide-scale impact, as Minister said, of COVID on just our peoples. The losses resulting from this global disaster have major social impacts that are manifested in different dimensions of human development and poverty. By the end of 2020, for instance, COVID-19 pushed 22 million Latin Americans into poverty, increasing the poverty rates in the region to 33.7% of the total population. The impact on education, with close to 120 million school-age children of the region losing or are at risk of losing an entire academic year. Those have resulted in worsening indices of inequality for Latin America and the Caribbean. So the numbers are there, they've calculated it, and each time we see them put down on paper, it's really scary, the emergencies we are upon, and so this conference is quite timely. I welcome now for her 5 to 7 minute presentation this lady. She was announced in January 2018 as the United Nations Secretary General with the appointment of Mami Mizuturi of Japan. She's the Assistant Secretary General for the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. She's also currently the Executive Director of Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures, University of East Anglia in the United Kingdom. She's done that since 2011. And before joining the Institute, she served for 27 years in the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs in various capacities, including Budget Director, Director of the Japan Information and Culture Center at the Embassy of Japan in London, Director of National Security Policy Division, Director of the UN Policy Division, Director of the Status of U.S. Forces Agreement Division, and Deputy Director of the Personnel Division. I think she needs a clone, but thank God she's here in person. Let's welcome the Special Representative to the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction at the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, Mami Mizuturi. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you. Thank you. This 7th regional platform for Latin America and the Americas is, as Emily mentioned, first to be hosted by a Caribbean country. And it's also the first regional platform in any region that my organization, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, has organized with the host country in a hybrid way. I remember 3 years ago when I was in Colombia, the 6th regional platform was held. And there, the Honorable Minister Mackenzie was there, and Jamaica announced that they would host this. And we were really very, very, very encouraged because climate emergency had already started to become a very, very difficult, challenging issue, affecting everybody, but disproportionately affecting small island developing states, least developed countries. And we thought it was so opportune that Jamaica, SIDS, would be hosting this. Now, little did we know that we would be actually meeting in this rather new way because of the worst disaster that has happened in 100 years, this pandemic. And again, the climate emergency, which is only getting more fierce. Just today, the 2-week COP26 has started, and we now have so many challenges about, of course, mitigating greenhouse gas emission, but how can we adapt better to climate emergency when so many countries, and again, disproportionately SIDS and least developed countries, are suffering, and it has become almost an existential, I shouldn't say almost, an existential issue. It has been challenging. I thank the government of Jamaica. I thank SEDIMA for co-organizing, hosting this event. But the fact that under the leadership of Minister Mackenzie that this meeting is held, this conference is held, is because of the fact that we know that we need solidarity and we need action right now. So during the 4 days, there will be 30 talks, 1,500 key actors, 130 speakers, defying the fact that we cannot all be in the same venue in Jamaica. There will be an important ministerial declaration coming on the regional status and challenges and achievements around disaster risk reduction. And there will be an improved regional action plan. And why are we doing all this? Because undermines sustainable development like a disaster. Nothing upends people's life like a disaster. Emily just read out what COVID-19 has done, is doing, and this is not the end of it. The recovery will be a long, painful recovery. So what can we do best? What can we do more is to make ourselves more resilient, make ourselves more preventative, so that before a disaster strikes, whether it's a pandemic or a hurricane or a volcanic eruption or an earthquake, that we put in resilience in every sector of our country, in every level of our country, which means not only nationally, but also in the cities and in the communities. And we must do it in the spirit of the Sendai framework, which is the global blueprint for disaster risk reduction. We must do it as a whole of society, because risk is everybody's business. As Minister Mackenzie mentioned, youth, they are one of the most important stakeholders at this moment for disaster risk reduction, but not only. Of course, the local governments, the cities, the private sector, the academia, the science and technology, and as Emily mentioned, the media. The media is so important to advocate for the need of better prevention. So that is why we are all here. And I am so encouraged to hear from Minister Mackenzie that he is happy with what happened during day one. We have day two, 3, day 4, and we know that we have to make this regional platform a success in terms of its content, what comes out of it, and its ambition. So let me stop here, and I would be happy to respond to questions with Minister Mackenzie. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that presentation, Mami Mizuturi, Special Representative for Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction at UNDRR. And as you mentioned, media, again, welcome to my colleagues who are joining from over 18 jurisdictions. They've got questions for you, Minister, and also for Ms. Mizuturi. Can I begin with you, Minister? Question from media colleague. What has Jamaica learned in disaster risk reduction issues that you could share with other small island developing states and other Caribbean countries?
Well, it's a very good question, because the lessons that we have learned is that a strong and effective local government system is required, is necessary in the fight against disaster. We have a robust local government system here in Jamaica. We have parish disaster coordinators in all 14 parishes across the island. We have a network of volunteers. We have a network that is spread right across that identify. We can tell you the communities that are vulnerable. We can tell you the areas that are prone to flooding. And we have an extensive maintenance program. Sometimes it might not be as effective as we want it to be, but the short answer to your question is that a structured and effectively run municipal organization is the key. And we also have the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, ODPEM, which has the overall responsibility for disaster management in Jamaica. So we manage disaster on a 24 hours basis every day of the week. We do respond the disaster. And I would recommend to my fellow brothers and sisters within the region that an effective local government system can help in many ways in the fight against disaster.
Thank you, Minister. For Ms. Mizuturi, what is the impact of disasters in human displacement, and are these figures being increased significantly by climate change?
Thank you very much for that question, which is a very, very pertinent question. So last year, 10 million people globally were displaced because of conflict, and 30 million people were displaced because of climate emergency. Now, this is a staggering figure. And the trend is that the number of people displaced, like climate emergency, is getting higher and higher. And in particular, where there is already poverty, where there is already inequality, where there is already a very weak foundation of sustainable development, when a climate emergency strikes, the tendency is that people are forcibly displaced. And this is why we believe that we need to look at these people first. How can we make their lives more resilient so that they do not have to be displaced in the first place? The agriculture sector, which is the one that has the most loss and damage from disasters, how can we make sure that droughts, floods do not have a great impact, a great to leave their land and move? And also, we need to understand what are the vulnerabilities that make people be displaced. It is an enormous issue, and it is something that we are focusing on more and more. And the fact is that if we cannot adapt better from climate emergency, if we cannot mitigate climate emergency better, it will become very difficult to, if not maintain this terrible number, but to reduce it. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you. Minister Mackenzie, I've wondered this, and I'm going to use moderator's privilege to ask. I see a lot of vertical buildings going up, a lot of so-called high-rise in Kingston in particular. And I wonder, in light of the climate emergency that we're up on, is it the intention, or has the government considered whether it would mandate that a particular percentage of these high-rise buildings, they ought to be taking their energy from renewable sources, for example, solar, if not, permission is not to be given. So we cut down on the use of oil and all of the harmful sources of energy for the entire world.
Well, the new Building Act that was passed a couple years ago speaks to section of that. We have already had up at the university what we could consider the green building that was built solely to be self-sufficient. It is something that is under consideration. The building sector has been engaging, especially the KSMAC in the corporate area. And it is something that I think is relevant based on where we are going now. There are already significant injections that have been made. For instance, most buildings now have to initiate, especially water harvesting, which is critical. All municipal buildings that are being constructed now has to be energy efficient in terms of water harvesting and putting in the necessary to reduce the cost of electricity. So we have done that with our infirmaries as a start. So the government is leaning towards that, but that will also require the engagement of the wider industry. And those discussions have commenced.
Yes, I urge immediate engagement. I see COP going on in Glasgow, and I really think we have to play our part there in doing what we can. Ms. Mizatori, question for you. In recent times, how has the UNDRR partnered with Caribbean countries in combating COVID-19 and other hazards?
So UNDRR is we should say, the supporter of all member states so that they can implement the Sendai framework. We have done a lot of things since COVID-19 started, but one very important thing is that we quickly looked at the national strategies of disaster risk reduction of all the countries in the world, including in Latin America and the Caribbean. And what we found out that in almost all countries, health is not integrated into the national strategies. And this is because, of course, traditionally, you would look at more natural hazard caused disasters in the case of the Caribbean hurricanes, in earthquake prone countries, earthquake. But in 2015, when the Sendai framework was adopted, it was included biological hazard because countries that experience MERS, SARS, Ebola said the next thing to come is pandemics and epidemics. But sadly, almost all countries did not put that in. So we have been then started working, and we continue to do this, to help governments integrate health into their national strategies for disaster risk reduction, help bringing together the national disaster management agencies and the public health agencies so that there is a coherent policy. And we are doing it not only with the countries in the region, but in the case of Caribbean, CDIMA, the regional organization for disaster risk reduction, is a very good partner.
On rural development. So it is not at a stage where we can speak definitively, but we are doing some test runs in selected parishes, and Chambers Pen in Hanover is one such parish that we have identified to do some intense renewal in those communities.
Right. Thank you. I'll keep looking out for those cities. I'll watch out, and we'll keep having the conversation. That is all the time we have for this opening press conference of the 7th Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. Can I thank so much my presenters for this afternoon's opening press conference, Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, the Honorable Desmond McKenzie. Thank you as well to Mami Mizatori, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction at the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. Just a quick reminder to my media colleagues, we thank you for joining, and we want to tell you that there are several training sessions which are very integral so we can know the appropriate language to use when we're talking about disasters. And so the training, there will be a session tomorrow, the 2nd November, and also the 3rd November. Each of those will take place from midday to 12:30, so that's only half an hour, and you're all invited. And additionally, we want to extend an invitation to you to attend the 4th of November press conference and join the network and benefit from all that is offered there. The 4th of November, it will be 11:30 to midday, and that's going to be just before the conference for UNDRR. So we look forward to having all of you, media colleagues from all over the world, at the 2 training sessions coming up and the one on Thursday. It has been my pleasure being with you. All of you going home, please be safe. Those of you at the conference center, and we look forward to having your company again. Please have a good afternoon. I'm Emily Shields.